You could save thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars without changing anything about your lifestyle by simply going to this one loan product. No skimping and penny pinching, no denial of vacation. In fact, just live your life like you do now, and your mortgage could be paid off 2 to 4 times faster, and you could be hundreds of thousands of dollars richer. Here's an example. The all-in-one loan product provides an interactive comparison simulator where you can compare their product, the all-in-one loan, with a comparison loan. In this scenario, I took a $300,000 house, assumed that there'd be a 25% down payment, which makes the principal $225,000. At the end of 30 years, at that 6.75% mortgage rate, this 30-year loan will have cost $525,361.03. It will have taken 360 months, which is 30 years times 12 months, to pay off, and the total interest would have been $300,361. Using the all-in-one loan product that we're going to discuss today, that 30 years becomes 10 years. That $300,000 of interest becomes $107,000 of interest, and that 360 months becomes 123. As a result, using the all-in-one loan product, you would save nearly $200,000. This is just one example. Hi, my name is Steve Ramsey, and I am a mortgage loan originator in Texas. I specialize in special products and techniques to help save you money rather than giving it to the bank or to the IRS. I'm all about beating the system and maximizing opportunity. I try to do it in my life, and I love helping others do it too. That's why I'm here today. The product I mentioned a minute ago is possibly the greatest cheat code out there to saving money and creating mortgage freedom that I know of. Honestly, when I heard about it, I couldn't believe this isn't a more common loan. I just showed it to a friend of mine a couple of days ago, and he couldn't believe it either. He sat there dumbstruck. He was a little in shock and said he was trying to wrap his mind around it. I showed him the numbers and how it could save him years in mortgage payments. I kid you not, it's that good. Part of the issue with this loan is that only one company in the country offers it. They have a trademark on it. The other issue I think that keeps this loan from being popular is that people just don't trust it because it varies so much from what's considered normal and from what their family and friends are doing. So most people have never heard of it, and when they do, they're skeptical. And that's fine. That's probably you. That was me too. However, there are numerous testimonials of people who have used this loan product and can testify to its effectiveness at changing their lives. In fact, some of them will never go back to a traditional loan product. You can find those in the description below. What exactly is this wonder loan product I'm talking about? Well, stay with me for just a few minutes and let me explain the gist of it, how it works, and how you could see if it works for you. First, let me go through the legalese and let you know that the all-in-one loan is a trademark product of CMG Home Loans. I'm not an employee of CMG, but my employer, who's NEXA Mortgage, has an agreement with CMG so that I can promote and offer this loan to you. At the outset, too, let me say that if you live paycheck to paycheck, this is probably not going to work for you. It will work, but it just won't work great. But if you're someone who has a little extra left over each month, or maybe you have a rainy day fund stored up in a savings account somewhere, or maybe your income's sporadic and you have a lot of income one month and less income the next, this loan could change your life. Another quick caveat, and I hate this because it affects me personally, but if you live in Texas, there are some restrictions on this loan in order for it to work for your primary residence. There are no restrictions for investments, but primary residence, Texas homestead laws make CMG do some workarounds. Also, if you're in Massachusetts or New Mexico, there are a couple restrictions as well, but I would say those are quite a bit more minor. So let me summarize the loan and then get into the specifics. This all-in-one loan is referred to as a first lien HELOC with sweeping checking account privileges. Basically, it's like your mortgage married a checking account and they had a financially savvy baby. Instead of your checking account money going into its own account each month, it sits in your mortgage account to lower the principal and thus lower the interest that you owe. You still have access to this money just like you do in your normal checking account. But it's just that when it's not being used to pay bills, it's actually working to lower your mortgage interest. This type of loan is actually not new. It started around 30 years ago in other countries around the world. Today you can still find it in countries like Australia, the UK, South Africa, Canada, and more. Theirs is called an offset mortgage, and while similar in principle to the all-in-one loan, it really differs in some important ways. The loan that I'm talking about today that's offered by CMG Home Loans is actually quite a bit better. But the point is simply that this type of loan works and has worked for decades. We just didn't know about it. So let's talk about how it works so well. Normally your money is split up and doing different things. Your checking or savings accounts over here, earning very little or no interest at all, and your mortgage is over here and accumulating interest debt anywhere from 3 to 8% every year. So what this program does is that it gets these two separate money accounts together. And this really is the whole key. When you deposit money into your bank account, it goes directly toward lowering your principal. Then, interest is recalculated that night on this lower amount. It might only save you a few dollars per day, but as this compounds over the days and months and years, it adds up significantly. Suppose you get paid every other week. You bring home $3,000. That money normally goes into your checking or savings account. But under this loan, your deposit goes into the all-in-one loan account, and it lowers your balance. If your balance was $300,000 at the beginning of the day, the interest figured on this loan will now be calculated off of $297,000 since you just deposited $3,000. That saves you about 66 cents that day at 8% interest. But you keep adding the days together, and this all adds up. And in 2 weeks, you get another $3,000 more you put into it, and it lowers the principal even more. Of course, you've got to live during this time, so you'll end up lowering your principal and then increasing it as you pay bills and you live your life. So basically, the principal will not be a steadily declining line. It'll go up and it'll go down. But throughout the month, as you actually earn more than you spend, all during that time, your principal is lowered and the interest that's figured on the loan will be off that lowered principal amount. In addition, just like any other checking account that you have, your all-in-one loan is in an FDI secured account. You get an ATM card, you have routing and account numbers, you have mobile banking and bank statements, everything you would expect with a normal checking account. This is why the all-in-one loan program is such a great option if you have a rainy day fund. Normally that money is just sitting there waiting for something bad to happen. But you might as well put it to use. It's kind of like having a fire engine cleaning your cars and watering your lawn rather than sitting idle in a fire station somewhere. At the end of the month, you probably, hopefully, have some savings left. Now, we all have those months where we don't save anything, but generally, if you're able to save some each month, this amount stays in the account to help keep the interest lower because your principal is lower. This is one of the most important parts of the loan. Let's look at one example in depth. You can do this on your own with your own numbers, but let me just show you with a hypothetical example of what it's like. If you go to my website, steveramseyloans.com, go over here to all-in-one loan, click on that, and scroll down. There's a little booklet that covers most of what I'm doing now, a little ebook. It's kind of cool if you click on the pages here, it turns and everything. You can watch it full screen. But anyway, go to the all-in-one loan simulator, which is right here, and let's run through an example together. So we're going to start a new simulation. If you want, on some of these other examples I've given you, there's a little code at the top left. You can put that in here where it says enter a code from a save simulation, or after you run your own simulation, you can come in, put that code in there, and it picks you back up where you left off. But in our case, we're going to start a new simulation, click go. In this example, let's say we're going to look for a rate and term refinance. So you own the property, you're thinking about refinancing it, and we're going to see if that's a good deal. Home occupancy, on this one, let's be a little different. Let's say it's an investment property, and let's compare it to an existing loan. So what we're looking at is, say you own a rental property, you've had it for a few years, you want to see whether or not refinancing to the all-in-one loan is a good idea. Now we're going to say the original, or the value of the house at least, is $300,000. Hopefully you've got some equity in it, so you bought it a few years ago, let's say 5 years ago, and you bought it at a good deal. We all know house prices have shot up. So let's just say the loan balance that you have on it is $180,000. And we're going to compare it to a 30-year fixed. And let's say, a few years ago you got a pretty good rate, but let's just say 7.25%. And in this case, we're going to say you've had it for 5 years. So we're going to go ahead and say we are 5 years into it. So that puts us 60 months in, because they base it off of months. And this just tells us basically what they say your loan payment would be. Of course, there's, if you have it what we call impounds or escrowed, you'll have your taxes and insurance on top of that. So we'll go ahead and click next. Now, where it says repeat deposit, this is going to be where your money comes in each month. Maybe you get paid every other week. So let's say you get paid $3,000 every other week. So we'll put 3,000, and we put biweekly, and it tells us our average would be this. This is how much per year. And let's say you have a spouse and they make $2,000, and also biweekly, they get paid every other week. We'll choose that. And since this is a rental property, we assume you're going to have some rent. So let's say they pay $1,500 of rent each month. So we'll do $1,500. In this case, we're going to go down here to monthly. Okay, so then we click save and close. You can add other things too. You could, if you wanted to run the test, you could always add a one-time deposit. Maybe you get your tax refund, or you get a bonus or something you wanted to throw toward it. You can add that there. But now we're going to go next, spending. So this is basically going to ask, this is saying this is how much money you make a month roughly. This is what your current loan is for the loan payment, not counting taxes and insurance. This is what they estimate taxes and insurance to be. Obviously that's going to vary a lot. And then they estimate your average monthly expenses would be this. There's an algorithm that tells them this, but I just like to ignore all this, to be honest with you. And I come down here and say, roughly, what percentage of your check each month are you able to save? So how much savings do you end up with every month? And, as we said earlier, if you're right at zero, this is probably not a great loan for you. But if you have some savings, let's just say you're able to save 10% a month, which is great. So at the end of the month, you've paid all your bills, your mortgages, your cell phone, internet, all that, and you're able to save 10%. So now we're in it. This makes a pretty big difference, to be honest with you, this number right here. But let's just say this is our example. Nothing's outlandish. Let's see what the results are. So we click on calculate results, and it's going to tell us how they compare. And there it is. The all-in-one loan would have you paying off the house in 8.2 years. You would pay $67,000, almost $68,000 in interest. Whereas if you kept going with the loan you currently have, it'd take you 25 years. Remember, we're 5 years into it. And it would cost you $210,000 of interest. So by going to the all-in-one loan, it shaves off almost 17 years and saves $142,396.62. It's pretty awesome. Now I want to go into some of these little buttons down here and what those can tell us even more. What is an especially good feature about this all-in-one loan is that even though you've paid down the principal, you still have access to those funds if you need them. Maybe it's college tuition. Maybe you want to remodel your house. Maybe you need to buy a new car. Or maybe you want to invest those funds. You have complete access to these funds without having to go through any kind of home refinance or any kind of HELOC program. That money is yours to use as you see fit. One of the biggest questions is, what is the interest rate? Really, I want to start off by saying it's the wrong question to ask. Because really what we're asking is, how much interest am I going to pay? Let me give you an example. Would you rather pay 10% on $100 or 5% on $1,000? One is a lower rate, the 5%, but one actually ends up spending less money on interest with the 10% on 100. If you paid 10% of $100, you'd pay $10. But if you paid 5% on $1,000, you'd pay $50. Even though the interest rate is half, the principal is so much larger that it's what increases the amount that you would actually pay. The goal really, when we're talking about interest and interest rates, is really not about having the lowest interest rate. The goal is about paying as little interest as possible. There are 3 ways, though, that this can be done. First, you can lower the interest rate. Second, you can lower the principal. Or third, you can decrease the amount of time that the loan is held. Most people only focused on the first way to pay less in interest. They want the lowest interest rate possible, and that's a great strategy. But what you'll see with the all-in-one loan, they utilize number 2 and number 3. This lowers your principal that the interest is calculated, and in turn it lessens the amount of time that you actually have the loan. You'll see in a minute with an example that we're going to run, the rate is a little bit higher than the typical 30-year fixed, but remember, the rate is only one of the 3 factors. The other 2 factors are working the entire time to help lower the total amount of interest that you have to pay. The all-in-one loan interest rate is not fixed. It floats above an index so that when you close on the loan, you choose how high above that index you want it to float. Currently, you can choose 2.5 to 4% margin above the index. The index that the margin is connected to is the Secured Overnight Financing Rate, or the SOFR. This is produced and published by the Federal Reserve Bank in New York in partnership with the United States Treasury Department's Office of Financial Research. So let's say you choose the 3% margin. Whatever the SOFR number is, add your margin to that, 3%, and this is your percentage rate. So if the SOFR is at 4% and you have a margin of 3%, your interest rate will be 7%. Now this is set on a monthly basis and can change between months. It can go up and it can go down. So while I know it might be a little disconcerting to have your interest rate tied to an index rather than be fixed, you're right that you won't know exactly what the rate will be, but we can look at the index historically and get a pretty good idea. In fact, you run the risk of having a lower interest rate just as much as you do increasing interest rate. Here's a picture of the SOFR chart from its beginning a few years ago. In addition, there are some safeguards in place that your rate will never exceed a certain amount. They set a ceiling, and for the all-in-one loan, the ceiling is set at 6% of the original rate. So you know that in the very worst circumstances, the most your rate will ever increase is 6%. So the cap rate will be capped at 6% above your initial rate. So here's how that works. Currently, today, the index is 4.311%. We chose the 4% margin, so we add 4% onto that, which gives us our initial rate of 8.311%. So if we closed on the loan today, that's our initial rate. If you add 6% to that, you get the maximum rate cap. Under no circumstances would your rate ever exceed 14.311%, which is pretty close to the break-even number, remember, that we looked at earlier. Also, though, the bank's got to make some money. So even if the SOFR goes to nearly zero like it did in 2020, you're still going to have to pay at least, since it's an investment, it's 4.75% interest. So that's the lowest you'll ever pay. 14.311 is the highest you'll ever pay. If this is your primary or secondary home, the floor is actually a percent lower, so it's 3.75% and not 4.75. So if that index drops way low, you're in pretty good shape paying only 3.75 if it's your residence. So let's be more realistic. Let's say, with our example earlier, we go in and calculate what would happen if the rate does go up. And let's say it goes up 2%, which is a whole lot for this particular index. Let's say it goes up 2%. Would you still save money? So in the new chart for the scenario, we're going to say the rate went up 2% after the first year, and then the rest of the life of the loan, it stayed at that same higher rate. Would you still save money? Well, let's look. If the rate goes up, things don't work out like you'd hoped. You hoped that you're hanging out at almost 8.5%, which seems like crazy high for an interest rate. If you're already sitting at, you may be at 7 or 6% right now, and you're thinking about refinancing and going to 8.5, does that make any sense? Let's go to rates and assumptions and say that the interest rate, let's say it jumps up 2% after the first year. So what we're going to say in this scenario is you're originally at 8.311, but after that first year, it jumped up to 10. So now your interest rate is 10.311. I don't think anyone would be really impressed with an interest rate that high, but we're just running the scenario. So we're going to go ahead and return to the results and see if we would still save money. If the interest rate jumped up, would we still save money and how much? And you can see, even if it jumped up 2% after the first year and just stayed there, you would still shave off 16, almost 17 years still off your mortgage. You would still save almost $121,000 in interest. So your mortgage is paid off in 8.8 years, even at a 10.311% interest rate. And that's just because of the power of this loan, because it focuses so much on paying down principal first instead of the interest, that it cuts down on the principal, which cuts down on the actual interest you have to pay, which then in turn cuts down on how many years it takes to pay it off. In this scenario, you see that you have still saved over $100,000 and shaved off 15 years from your loan. Our original loan was 8.311%, but after that crazy first year, it rose to 10.311 for the duration. That sounds like a very high interest rate. And if you told your neighbors and your family that, hey, our interest rate on our house is 10.3%, they'd think you're crazy. But you can see from the simulator that even with a 10.311% rate, you still save 15 years and over $100,000. Another nice thing about the simulator is that it gives us a percentage where the break-even interest rate is. In other words, if you just keep your loan now versus using the all-in-one loan, what would the all-in-one loan percentage have to get to before the whole thing was a wash and everything was equal? Of course, this also marks the spot at which point, if it continues to increase, you would lose money. So let's look back at our example and see what the break-even interest rate would be. And now we're going to look at one particular button you have here that will help you to see what the break-even number is. And you click that, and it tells us the break-even percentage rate is 14.239%. So what that means is the interest rate that you would have to be paying just to break even would be almost 14.25% when compared to the current loan that you have. That's a pretty high percent, and the odds are it's not going to get there. But if it did, now you're just at break even. But as long as you're under 14%, You're making money by staying in the all-in-one loan. There's also a floor rate, which is the bottom rate that it can go to. So if the SOFR was around 0% like it was in 2021, you still have a minimum rate, which as of right now, the floor rate is 3.75% for primary and secondary homes and 4.75% for investment properties. Both of those are still really good rates, but the bank has to make some money. I don't want to paint the picture that there's no risk involved, because there's always risk, but it's a calculated risk, just as getting on a plane is a risk, but a minor risk. I personally hate flying, probably because I'm not a huge fan of heights. If flying were on the ground, I'd be all over that, but I guess that's what trains are. But if I need to go on a 1,000-mile trip, should I fly or should I drive? Logically and factually, the odds are that I'm a lot safer flying 1,000 miles rather than driving it. In fact, when you do the math, I'm actually 190 times safer flying rather than driving. The problem is that I drive all the time and I haven't died yet. I know driving, I'm comfortable with driving, I'm familiar with driving, so all of that gets in the way of something that I'm not as familiar with. Even though you throw the facts and figures at me, I'm not super comfortable with it. And that's really kind of what we see here with this loan product. You're familiar with the 30-year fixed loan. It seems safe because you might have had one before, you might be on one now. Your neighbors are on one, your parents are on one. The reality is, however, that in the 20 years that the all-in-one loan product has existed, there's never been one default. Not once. No one has ever defaulted with the all-in-one loan product. That's a pretty safe record. Let's look at the all-in-one loan product and the interest rate a different way. If you buy a $300,000 house at 6.5% interest on a fixed 30-year loan and nothing changes, when it's paid off, guess how much money you would have spent in total? $682,560. And of that, you will have paid $382,560 in interest. The house cost $300,000. You actually paid $27,000 more in interest than you even paid for the house. This is the reason banks are so quick to offer these types of loans, and they funnel people into these fixed rate programs for 30 years. Sounds safe and easy, and so we do it. Our parents did it, our neighbors did it. We talked about the risk earlier. So I simply ask, is this risky? Is it risky to pay the bank almost $400,000 rather than saving it or investing it in something else? There's a certain amount of risk to that. I want to show you one of the most powerful charts that the all-in-one loan simulator makes. This is the paydown table. This shows you principal balance per month over the lifetime of the two loans. Click here, paydown table. It brings up a table and shows us kind of an amortized chart of, say, year one, month one, what's our loan balance, what's the principal that we've paid at this point. And you can see the loan, all-in-one loan, is on the left. The comparison loan, which is our 30-year fixed loan, is on the right. And it shows you at this point in the loan, where are you? So after the first year, first month, your loan balance with all-in-one loan is $181,000. The comparison loan is actually quite a bit less at $179,000. And you'll see after month two, $180,000 versus $179,000. So things don't look so good at this point. But then things start to change in month 3, 4, etc. But what I like to do is to see where zero is. So we've said that the all-in-one loan will pay it off a lot faster. So here we are at really our last payment, essentially, is the 97th month, which is year 9. And our balance was this, it's paid off, and now our balance is at 0. At this point in the loan, if we'd stuck with our original loan, the 30-year fixed, see what our balance is, $151,562.80. So if we had not changed to the all-in-one loan, we'd still be paying that principal plus all the different interest that we'd have to pay over the next few years. In fact, we finished that loan at month 97, right? So look at how many more months we have left before this is paid off under the comparison loan. So here we are going down to month 300, and finally it's paid off. And all that time, look at all these zeros that's been happening. All these months that you've had no loan balance because you paid off your principal way back in year number 9. I think that's a pretty powerful graphic, but it's even more powerful when you consider what you can do with that money that's left over. Because part of the great thing about paying your mortgage off so soon is that you have that money now to spend however you want instead of giving it to the bank. So in this case, let's run through a scenario, and I'll show you just how powerful that can be. You've paid off under the all-in-one loan. You paid off your loan. The last payment would have been in the month 97. So you've got month 98 all the way to month 300 to invest. So if you'd kept the original loan, you'd be paying that same $1,301.05 to the bank every month for 202 more months. So now we're just going to take that amount and we're going to invest it. And let's just choose a simple investment like a bank CD, certificate of deposit, that only produces 3%. So now you're used to paying that money, and instead of just blowing it all on fancy jewelry and food, you decide, hey, you know what? I'm used to spending $1,300 a month. Let me just put it in a bank CD and let it earn interest, and it's going to earn 3% interest. So you do that every month for 202 more months. At the end of that time period, so at the end of the time period that this loan is still going, it's not finished until month 300, how much money would you have earned rather than giving it to the bank? The answer is that you would have $330,189.94. That's $330,000 you'll have earned by paying yourself and investing it rather than just paying off a loan. That's a lot of money. Now that's just 3%. If you doubled that and you went to a 6% return, which is still not real high, it's definitely a modest return, then the amount that you would have at month 300 would be $417,911.17. That's almost $500,000. So in both scenarios, at the end of that 30 years, your house is paid for. But with the original loan, which is a 30-year fixed loan, you have no house payment, no loan payment, but you also don't have any investment. Under the all-in-one loan, at the end of that same time period, not only is your house paid off, you have almost $500,000. To me, that's where the power is. It's mind-blowing that not only do you not lose the money to the bank, you can use that money to do something even better. It is mind-blowing. In fact, if you're like me, still seems too good to be true. But it's not. It is true. And there are lots of testimonials of people who have done it and sing its praises. So where do we go from here? Go online and try it out yourself. You can plug in your own numbers in the loan simulator that you can find at my website at steveramseyloans.com. Click that and select the all-in-one loan simulator, and you can go through and apply your numbers for your mortgage and see if this is a great fit for you. If you have more questions or you run through the simulator and you want to talk more about it, shoot me a text or an email or give me a call and I'll help you as best I can. I'm licensed in Texas and Missouri currently, but even if you're in another state, call me or text me. I'll help you out and refer you to someone who can do the loan for you. I know you have a lot to think about, and just be prepared for confusion and skepticism from people when you try to explain this to them. It's natural. You were skeptical. I was skeptical. Everyone I've shared this with is skeptical. But when you run the numbers, you can see the effects and how powerful of a loan product this is. Go ahead, run the numbers, do some studying, and give me a shout. Take care. See you soon.